Welcome back to Terria, friends. Every now and then you're gonna get a build that shakes up the meta and just gets you so excited to play the game. Chronomancer support builds have gone from being slightly B tier to S tier. Absolutely incredible support tier class. Whether you want a DPS support, heal support, play quickness, alacrity, anything you can think of, this class can do. Now join me and find out why I love this class so damn much. A disclaimer before we get further into the guide, I'm not really a ridiculously good player. I'm going to give you what I think is a really good build. And this build is one of those builds that can take quite a lot of skill to pull off extremely well. But I am going to give you some advice and some tips of utilities and traits to take to make this easy for newer players. And then as you get better, you can just take the training wheels off and just crack on. Also in this guide, I'm going to predominantly focus on the heal support Chronomancer initially, and then maybe I'll follow it up with the guide for the DPS support Chronomancer. So let's have a look now at gear and stats. For gear, you've got a couple of really strong options. My favorites in particular are Harriers and Givers. I pretty much prefer Givers because first of all, it's giving me a ton of toughness, which basically means I'm going to be tanked pretty much in most encounters, lots of healing power and concentration. Now obviously, if you do go for Harriers, they just swap the toughness stat for power. So this allows you to do a little bit more DPS in the exchange for toughness. So if you are a person that doesn't like tanking, this is definitely a way you can go. For other pieces of armor, you can consider things like Minstrels, Magi's, and Celestials, depending on what stats you want to go for. Obviously, you will drop a lot of concentration, making boon uptime maybe a little bit sketchy, but that's up to you as a player. Then for runes, you can either look at Rune of the Monk, which is definitely the meta, and I highly recommend it, or something like Rune of Sanctuary, anything with boon duration. And now for weapons, if we can, we take the Scepter and the Shield as our main set. These will help us tremendously as there are a few things like the auto attack from the Scepter, which generates tons of clones, allowing us to do lots of shattering. And obviously the shield has got a lot of protection, swiftness and might attached to it, making it quite good for general boon uptime. Now for all weapon sets, we definitely want Paralyzation as well as Transference. Paralyzation is just going to help us get out a ton of CC. Now obviously if you're doing more content where CC isn't really a thing, which I can't really see in Guild Wars 2 not being a thing, then you can look at something else like concentration. Then for our off weapon set, we'll probably end up using the Focus. A Focus 4 literally is the best pull in the game. Useful for all raids, fractals, open world events, anything. It is ridiculously strong as well as a good source of swiftness. Now, two other weapons that we can consider is the rifle. The rifle has a strong phantasm skill with 2 charges, making it a really strong skill if you are more of the alacrity provider. Also really strong healing and utility boons on this build, making it really strong if you do not need the focus pull. However, another really strong weapon is also the greatsword. Very quick clone generation, good quick phantasm skill as well as a strong knockback, making it also a viable option in some encounters. And now for our Relic. Relic of the Flock is a really strong option if you do use the mantra of recovery. This will mean that you basically allow yourself and your party to get some good barrier when using your heal skills. But if you are going to look at one of the other heal skills, which we'll get into later, like say the Well of Eternity, then obviously Relic of the Monk is really strong. Now for food and utilities, we're looking at anything with healing power as well as concentration. We want to try get as close to 100% as possible, and that will help ease up our rotations. We don't have to stress about our alacrity or might uptime. Then for utilities, the bountiful maintenance oils are always strong, allowing yourself to get increased healing percentage based on your healing power. Now let's have a look at our traits and specializations to see where the magic of this build comes from. Minor trait 1, Metaphysical Rejuvenation, giving us regen whenever we use a healing skill. This is one of the most important parts of our rotation as we need permanent regeneration. Now with your boon duration, you should be able to keep up permanent regeneration, but notice it does have a 10-second internal cooldown. Especially when using the mantra, you can obviously spam this for big heals, but you'll only get this effect once every 10 seconds. Now in column 1, we've got 3 strong options. The first option, Myth of Madness, allows us to do the Lesser Chaos Storm or when using a healing skill. Lesser Chaos Storm is an extremely strong skill, gives boons to allies, conditions to enemy, but it also is a daze on the first strike. meaning that in certain cases you might want this for the random boons, random conditions, as well as maybe the days. Even though this is a strong option, we usually look at illusionary defense as our main choice. What this does is it grants ourselves and our party protection when we use a shatter skill. We'll be using shatters a lot to generate boons, meaning that we'll provide a large amount of protection uptime with this skill. Generally, as the boon healer, it is your job to provide protection to the group. However, if someone is providing protection, you can look at one of these other options. Third option, Master of Manipulations, also very strong. Ages for yourself and your allies in a 300 radius. This is really great if you're doing more like portal things, like if you're doing Escort and Wing 3. Minor Trait 2, Illusionary Membrane. You gain Chaos Aura when you use your F2 Shatter skill, which is just really nice to have. Chaos Aura is going to give you some extra boons and give enemies conditions when you strike them. This also gives you extra condition damage, so it's just really nice to know about and to have. Now, even though the first and third options in column 2 are really nice, we like a Chaotic Transference. When we gain Chaos Aura ourselves, we grant it to nearby allies, which remember gives them extra boons, allows them to put extra conditions on targets, making it really strong. We also gain Regeneration, so yeah, a very nice trait to have. So obviously Chaotic Transference is linked to Minor Trait 2, Illusionary Membrane, and that basically works off of our F2 skill. Remember, the cooldown is reduced for every clone we shatter with, meaning that we can kind of keep up a very high uptime of Chaos Aura, meaning we're getting a lot more boon uptime of just random boons. And now pretty much one of the absolute best minor traits, Minor Trait 3, Chaotic Persistence. When we have Regeneration, we gain 250 concentration as well as 250 expertise. This is a massive trait to have because remember, we are gaining regeneration from different sources, meaning we should have 100% regeneration uptime, meaning we're going to have all that extra concentration to maintain high boon uptime. Now in column 3, even though Chaotic Interruption could be something interesting for your open world experience, we don't really look at it too much. In fact, we look at the next two. Prismatic Understanding. Basically, we gain increased stealth duration, which is really nice if you're using your mass invisibility, maybe for some portaling, as well as gaining random boons while you're in stealth. So yeah, this could definitely play really nicely into effect when you're doing some skips with stealth or things like that in fractals, raids, or even out in open world, making it quite a nice trait to be aware of. The main support trait, however, is Bountiful Disillusionment, an incredible trait to have. This gives you stability when using a shatter skill. As well, your shatter skills gain extra effects. So i.e. your F1 will give you might, F2 will give you vigor, and so on and so forth. This is a ridiculously good trait and one that should be used, especially in things like fractals. Having stability on your shatter skills means that you're just going to have less time of people getting interrupted or knocked down. Now for our second specialization, Inspiration. Minor Trait 1, Mender's Purity. We cast a lesser power cleanse when we use our heal skill, making it ridiculously strong if we are using something like the Mantra of Recovery, because we will have 2 charges. So we can cleanse conditions fairly easily. Just notice that there is an internal cooldown, but it should time up okay because there is an internal cooldown on using your mantra itself. Now in column 1, all 3 choices are viable to a degree. Medic's Feedback. When reviving, we cast feedback, so it's like a projectile reflect dome that we can put around. Obviously this could grief you in some fights where you don't want to reflect projectiles because it can kind of kill your team. Still something you can use, especially out in open world. Choice 2, Restorative Mantras. This is pretty much your go-to because when you use a mantra skill, not only are you getting the effect of the mantra, but you're also getting a nice AoE party-wide heal, making even things like your Mantra of Pain a healing skill. Then something like Sympathetic Visage. This could be extremely strong in a lot of fights where there are just tons of conditions and you need to cleanse them. When you summon a Phantasm, it will take 1 condition with it. This could be extremely strong if you are going to run certain things like Phantasmal Disenchanter. Maybe you need the Boon Rip as well as Condi Cleanse, making this ridiculously good. Now Minor Trait 2, Inspiring Distortion. When you use your F4 skill, or you give yourself distortion, you will grant Aegis to your party. So this is a really important thing to be aware of, especially in fractals where Aegis is like gold. Now in column 2, if you are playing with the focus, which is pretty much what I've recommended for your initial set, Warden's Feedback is ridiculously strong. This allows your focus skills to reflect projectiles, which is, yes, very strong, could grief your team in some fights, so just be aware of that, and reduces the cooldown on focus skills. So being able to have the focus 4 pull more often is just ridiculously good. If not the second choice, Ego Restoration is another really strong option, and this is pretty much what a lot of builds do recommend off the bat. When using your healing skill, you're just going to generate clones, which means you're going to get more shatters. Minor Trait 3, Illusionary Inspiration. This increases your healing by 15%. As well, when you summon an illusion, you will heal everybody around you. So that just makes all of your illusionary skills nice heal skills. So yeah, really strong. Now in column 3, everything seems viable to a degree. Mental defense, being able to have a stun break as well as resistance on your F4 shatter skill, that could work in a lot of fights. But the way most people go is restorative illusions. What this means is that for the amount of clones you have up when you shatter, you'll gain a massive party-wide heal as well as remove a condition. So yeah, ridiculously strong, especially for the condi removal aspect. But a lot of people do like blurred inscriptions. What this means is that it will create extra effects on your signets, just making them stronger. And probably one of the most important parts about blurred inscriptions is the fact that you gain distortion when activating a signet. And remember, because of the traits that we have, you can gain ages from this. So sometimes in certain fractal groups, that might be the way you'll go for just a lot more survivability and defense. And now for our final specialization, Chronomancer. Your minor trait 1 gives you access to different shatters from your base mesmer as well as access to your well abilities. Now I'm going to simplify this build and tell you pretty much there's almost always one choice. For the first column, we want all's well that ends well, which means we gain a massive 5 target heal with our wells, making our wells a nice strong healing skill. Your minor trait 2, Flow of Time, what this means is you will gain alacrity based on the amount of clones you shatter, and that's personal alacrity. So that just helps you with your own alacrity uptime. And that feeds perfectly into column 2, Improved Alacrity. What Improved Alacrity does is it kind of changes the way alacrity affects you as a mesmer. And this is pretty much one of the most unique traits you'll find in the entire game. So instead of alacrity affecting you for 25% reduced recharge speed, it actually affects you for 50% reduced recharge speed, meaning that you've got skills coming off cooldown a lot quicker. So this is a massive skill in terms of our support ability. However, the alacrity that we produce in ourselves will eat away 33% quicker. So that means that we need to bridge that gap, because you then as a support might produce 100% alacrity on the group, but you yourself won't be able to produce 100% alacrity on yourself. So this is where Flow of Time helps you bridge that gap and make sure that you're capping your alacrity uptime personally. And minor trait 3, Time Marches On. You move 25% quicker and movement impairing effects last 25% shorter on you. So yes, an extremely nice skill, especially if you're in charge of doing mechanics. This allows you to branch away from the group quicker and do mechanics quicker than other players. And now in column 3 is where we get our support ability. We either have Stretch Time, which means Phantasm skills will produce alacrity for 5 targets at a 360 radius, or we can choose Seize the Moment. This is different, however, from Stretch Time, because now your shatter skills will produce quickness to nearby targets, as well your Phantasm skills will produce quickness to nearby targets, making it a lot easier, in my opinion, to keep up quickness than it is alacrity. Now, if you are playing this build out in open world or metas, I usually recommend going for quickness because it is a lot easier to maintain. As well, you yourself will gain personal alacrity from Flow of Time, meaning that quickness will just allow people to do a lot more DPS out in open world. And now for the actual toughest part of this guide, utilities. Utilities on a mesmer are so extreme. As well, because there is so much going on in how you produce alacrity or quickness, you have to think about how easy you want your boon uptime to be, how skilled of a player you are, and also how skilled your group is, because that can determine a lot of how you pick your traits. So I'm going to change it up. I'm going to talk to you about what I consider pretty much the non-negotiables, and that are your Well of Action and your Well of Precognition. I like these two wells extremely highly because the Well of Action is going to produce a lot of might. Let's assume you've got perfect alacrity uptime. That means that the skill will come off cooldown every 10 seconds, meaning that we can keep up ramped up times of might, meaning that eventually this skill can almost produce all the might required in your group. As well, it's going to give you a permanent source of fury if you have perfect alacrity. Well, precognition is one of your best sources of Aegis as well as stability, And remember, because we've traded All Wells that Ends Well, both these skills are also heal skills, meaning that they're very good supportive boon skills. That being said, you can always switch these out. Some fights don't require Aegis or stability, meaning you can look at different options. Now for healing skills, there are 3 skills that I recommend. A lot of people like Well of Eternity. It is a big heal. Remember, because of All Wells that Ends Well, we've got more healing. So this is a big burst healing well skill. Also, it does have condition removal, making it a really good skill overall. Then we have the Mantra of Recovery. This skill is really strong for other reasons. Remember, we have traded that we get extra healing while bursting mantras, and because there's 2 charges, as well as an initial setup heal, this is a really good source of burst healing. Then let's talk about the Dark Horse skill, and what I mean by that is the Signet of Ether. Because this skill is a very selfish skill, it produces a heal on yourself, a lot of players will say, no, I can't take this skill, it's not good. But if you are a newer player and you do struggle with boon uptime, this can be an important way to reset your phantasms, meaning that you can basically use your skills to produce alacrity and quickness more often. Now let's go on to the 3rd utility skill. This is the first one that I would recommend changing. Mantra of Pain is really strong because it's going to give you that extra might up time at the beginning of fights that is good for ramp up. As well, every time you use a charge, you'll gain the heal and the vulnerability on the target, meaning that it is a really strong skill overall for boon uptime as well as vulnerability uptime and also good healing. But we can look at a few other options. The options that I personally like, I like Well of Senility. This gives you a nice 3-second daze as well as a heal, making it a ridiculously strong skill if you do require CC as well as just some passive healing. Obviously everything to do with portaling, whether it's portal, mimic and blink, things like that. Highly recommend depending on the fight. Usually what I do is I have a separate build for when I need to do portal things or whatever, and I just kind of switch between them. Now also, do not sleep on skills like Phantasmal Defender, because you will probably end up being tank most of the time when playing this, because Mesmers are the best tanks in game. This is a really strong skill as well. Because it's a phantasm, it's going to help you with your quickness and alacrity uptime. That also coupled with something like Phantasmal Disenchanter, a really strong skill. Remember, this skill is going to be off cooldown almost every 10 seconds. So that's going to help you an absolute train load with your boon uptime as well. This is a 5 boon removal skill. So if a target has 5 boons, like you're looking at Doom and he's sucked in for greater, you just cast the skill and you'll rip off pretty much almost all his boons. As well, it is going to help you with your boon uptime. Now the mantra skills themselves, Mantra of Distraction, really strong. Mantra of Resolve, having that Condi cleanse is absolutely amazing. And also Mantra of Concentration, having the Aegis and stability of this skill is huge. Now a lot of fights, like if you're doing Sloth the Tsar and all these other fights, you do want to have the stability. And remember, because of how we've traded, when we do use the charges on mantra skills, we will gain that extra healing, making the skill also a nice healing support skill. Then obviously your Signet of Inspiration, ridiculously strong. Being able to extend boons is obviously always a really good choice, especially if you have blurred inscriptions, because that also then will produce the Aegis that we get from Inspiring Distortion. So yeah, really strong to have. Things like obviously your Signet of Domination, having that CC, again, just so good to have. So there's a lot of option in terms of your utilities. I know I've given you a ton of utilities, but let's get on to the elite utilities now. Now it doesn't get easier. Literally all 4 of these are good options. Mass Invisibility, if you are doing things with portals or skips in fractals and raids, Mass Invisibility is absolutely massive. Then obviously a Signet of Humility, having the transformation to Moa, especially for fractals, is god tier. Like that CC is very strong. Then obviously Well of Gravity is kind of more CC over time, but what's nice about it is it does bring the healing because of All Well that Ends Well. With that being said, an even longer cooldown is Time Warp. Time Warp is quite a nice skill to have, especially if you are doing more of the quickness uptime, or if you're doing Alacrity but the quickness giver is struggling slightly. This basically allows you to produce extra quickness, and using this inside of your continuum split, being able to cast it twice is just going to help you get really good quickness uptime really quickly. Now obviously I don't want to teach you Mesmer Chrono from the absolute beginning, but because this is a newer player guide, I do want to explain a few things about certain weapon skills. Now the reason why we take the scepter from the beginning is because the auto attack chain final hit produces a clone. So this is pretty much the quickest one-handed weapon that can produce clones in terms of Mesmer, meaning you'll have a lot of clones for shattering, so that means you can use a lot of these amazing skills. Now your skill 2 is also a very strong skill. This is basically a channel to block that will allow you to block one attack, not channeling for the full duration and blocking entire attacks. Very important to be aware of that. But also it is a clone skill, meaning you can generate even more clones. It's also got an evade frame attached to it. If you cast it a second time, you can use counterspell for some good blind soft CC and as well confusion. Now skill 3 used to be an absolute staple in Condi Chrono builds, and this basically is just a channeled skill that just allows you to rack up a ton of confusion on a target. Now focus skill 4, like I said before, is literally the best pull in the game. So this skill is highly recommended, and this is pretty much one of the most important responsibilities you'll have as a Heal Chrono. And then focus 5, Phantasmal Warden. This skill produces a high amount of vulnerability, actually some good DPS, but most importantly for us, it's producing our Phantasm. Now remember, because of the traits that we've taken, we will produce either Alacrity or Quickness on Phantasm Summonings. So that means that this skill is pretty much one of the first skills you're going to want to get out in your rotation to get your initial Alacrity or Quickness uptime. Now for our shield, shield 4 is a very funny skill. This skill basically is a channel block, and unlike Scepter 2, this will block all attacks during its channel duration, making it one of the best blocks in game. And this is why Mesmer is just literally, or Chronomancer is just the best tank in the game, because it's so damn good. Also, this is a Phantasm skill, meaning you will produce Quickness or Alacrity from the skill. But if in the duration of the channel you block an attack, you will get Deja Vu, which means you can basically use the exact same attack a second time. This is incredibly strong because it's also a Phantasm skill, helping you produce Quickness and Alacrity based on the traits you've taken. As well, you'll block again, meaning you can basically tank a lot of bosses' attacks. Now in certain fights, you will have to go and bait out this block attack so that you can double cast to maintain your Quickness and Alacrity. But just be aware of this, that is something that Chronos sometimes need to do. They need to actually go and stand in attacks while blocking so that they can basically bait out Deja Vu. Now Tides of Time is also a really strong skill. We're getting 8 stacks of might, swiftness, as well as a stun. So this is the kind of skill that you're going to want to use almost in the beginning of a fight if you know there's no CC coming, to try and help ramp up your might uptime. Because remember, certain things like your Well of Action are going to take a bit of time to ramp up on might, so using Tides of Time a really strong way to do that. This skill is also a projectile block. Now this can grief you in certain fights, like if you think of Matthias, you don't want to destroy certain projectiles, but in certain fights you do, so just be aware of the fight and when to use this skill because you could end up griefing. Now the rifle, if you do take it, is the newest weapon from Secrets of the Obscure that they've redone in the game. The auto attack is basically damage, but the healing portion is what we're interested in. So basically just auto attacking, getting some good heals. Skill 2, Journey, is a clone skill, so good to build up for your shatters. Very important to be aware of this, as well as regeneration and some soft CC, making it a really strong skill. Skill 3, Inspiring Imagery. This skill is a bit of a funny skill. Basically, there's 2 ways to do it. You can either shoot this down and allow it to expire, granting you might and fury. Or you can detonate it prematurely and gain quite a large heal, as well as obviously weakness and blindness, so some good soft CC. So it's kind of one of those things where you've got to decide what you want. Skill 4, and probably the most important for our purposes, Phantasmal Sharpshooter. This has got 2 charges to the skill, and it's a really good stun. But it's also a Phantasm skill, so it's kind of a quandary of you want to use this to help stack up your Quickness and your Alacrity, but you don't want to not have it for when you need it for CC. So it is one of those skills you need to be aware of. I just also want to note that if you do use Signet of Ether, it only recharges 1, not both charges. And then probably one of the coolest skills, Singularity Shot. When using this, you'll gain barrier, which is really good because basically you're just providing barrier as well as resistance. But When activating again, you will activate a second part of the skill, Dimensional Aperture. I don't know if I'm saying that right, but basically it creates a portal, allowing a target to teleport from that area to you. So this is a ridiculously good life-saving ability. So say if you see someone who's, stranded from the group and kind of like stuck in like, I don't know, some poison or something, and you want to get them to you, you shoot this ability over, give them some barrier or whatever, proc it again, get the portal, and they can just teleport over to you. So it's kind of also a really good way to save someone who's kind of stranded out in a bit of a random spot. And if you do find yourself using the Greatsword is a ridiculously fun weapon to play around with. Skill 2 has got a super short cooldown, and it is a clone skill. Remember, with Alacrity, it's going to be like 2.5 seconds, meaning that you can generate tons of clones and do loads of shatters with this. Skill 3 is a cripple, meaning a little bit of soft CC, just something nice to be aware of. And skill 4 is your Phantasm skill. It's got a very short cooldown compared to other Phantasm skills, meaning that you'll be able to generate a lot of quickness and alacrity quite easily with this. And then skill 5, Illusionary Wave. This is a knockback skill or a CC skill. Perhaps you need to handle the Tormented Dead in the Soulless Horror, or in Keep Construct you have to push orbs, or set up Rigum for the DPS phase in Samrog. Having Sword 5 allows you to be able to pretty much handle a lot of mechanics, and it brings a lot of utility. Now let's have a quick go over of our shatter skills. Remember, our shattered skills are absolutely loaded. There's certain things that aren't even showing, like the heal from shatters, things like that. Our shatter skills are amazing. Now F1 is obviously going to be the skill you'll hit most often because it has a very short cooldown. Remember, it should be about 6 seconds with approved alacrity, and this will help us produce either our own personal alacrity or group-wide quickness. Now F2 skill Rewinder, remember, has got that chaos aura that's going to give random boons as well as random conditions, so a very nice skill to have, as well as a bit of vigor. This is a pretty unique shatter as its cooldown is reduced by the amount of clones you've shattered when using it. That means that we can get the skill off cooldown a lot quicker if we shatter with high amounts of clones. Now your F3 shatter time sink is pretty much your big CC shatter. So obviously the CC increases by the amount of clones we have. This also produces slow, which is a soft CC. So yeah, it's very important to, kind of preemptively stack up clones if you know a big CC bar is coming. Now your F4 distortion shatter is pretty much a big source of a large amount of stability. As well, remember, we're gaining distortion, which is going to give us Aegis and all the other really nice effects. Now remember, we do gain 1 stack of stability when using all our other shatter skills, so we do have other sources of stability. But if you've got certain fights where you need a couple of stacks of stability, distortion is definitely one of the best ways to look at. And then Continuum Split, your F5 shatter. This is the unique gameplay style of the Chronomancer. What basically it does is when you activate Continuum Split, your cooldowns, your health, everything is basically pinpointed down, your position, everything. You can do whatever you want while Continuum Split lasts, and then when it wears off, you will revert back to the exact same health, cooldown, position, everything. Now, sometimes there can be a curse where there's some sort of mechanic that appears underneath you that it's like a one-shotter that you will be pulled back into, and that means you need to reactivate Continuum Split. So pretty much cancel it and just run out of the mechanic, or you can use a lot of skills in this time. Now, pretty much the things that we kind of would recommend is certain things like your Phantasm skills to help stack as much quickness or alacrity. Use absolutely every one of your shatter skills, because you can cast these while doing other skills. They won't stop you from doing other things, meaning you'll get free quickness, alacrity, things like that, and boons. Then if you want to, you can try get off other things, like if you have time warp, trying to get that in there obviously for some free quickness is also really strong. Try to make sure that you're bursting whatever you can before Continuum Split wears off, and that way you've just got a lot of survivability, boons, and supporting skills already applied to your group. Now let's talk about the rotation / gameplay concept of the heal kind of support Chronomancer. First thing you need to do is figure out what weapons you're bringing to the fight. Now generally in most cases you'll probably end up bringing the focus pull because it is just so strong. Now if you don't need that, I would look at the rifle. The rifle's got a lot of healing and fun support skills that give a lot of boons. And also the fact that it has 2 charges on its Phantasm skill is going to make keeping up boons very easy. Now if you do want to play with the Greatsword, it is kind of, I would say, not like a more advanced way of playing, but I think more advanced players would be like, oh, I can help push by doing this, and kind of look at the greatsword as an option. But as a newer player, I would say the focus and the rifle are the two you need to consider mostly to try to figure out what you're doing. Especially if you're doing more open world things, having the rifle and being able to support more from range is really strong. Now also, you need to consider what your group needs you to bring, whether it's quickness or alacrity, and you will switch one of these two traits based on what you need to do. I honestly, in personal opinion, think that quickness is a lot easier to maintain because you're going to get the AoE from your shatter skills, and because of all the clone generation from all your other skills, it is so easy to do. Now, alacrity isn't super hard to do, but it is a lot harder. Now, if there is obviously a herald in the other group that's providing the quickness and you're providing the alacrity and you're a newer player, say to them, can I pair with the herald just for the increased boon duration? Because heralds obviously increase boon duration, so that will help you maintain alacrity a little easier. Now, if you are a newer player and you struggle with your boon uptime, because remember, that's your predominant job. Your predominant job is to provide 100% boon uptime. That's your job. Then your second job as a support healer is to do healing. So in my opinion, the boon uptime is almost more important than the healing itself, although obviously the healing is ridiculously important. Now, if you struggle, have a look at Phantasmal Disenchanter. This Phantasm will just help you keep up your boon uptime even more. But if you are a new player and you're even struggling still, have a look at Signet of Ether. This will bring off your Phantasm skills and your Phantasmal Disenchanter instantly off cooldown when you use it, your heal skill. So this will basically allow you to keep up super good boon uptime, although you are giving up a lot of group-wide healing. A few of the things that you should look at from deviating the build is switching up traits. If you're not taking the focus, obviously look at Ego Restoration for some extra clone generation. And obviously, if you are doing something like fractals and you do want more ages, to look at Blurred Inscription and take maybe some signets instead, especially for boon extension. Having Signet of Inspiration is really strong. Now for the interesting side, you'll notice if you hover over these two, your boons that you give is only in a 360 radius around you. That is actually quite close. That means that stacking is going to have to be quite good in terms of your team. It's not like necessarily like a renegade where you just push F4 and all of a sudden you can see the circle and you can just move to make sure that your coat and everybody's stacking up. These skills happen quick with your shatters and things. You don't necessarily get to see that radius very easily. And that means that when you're more an inexperienced group and people struggle to stack because they're scared, they're not going to get your boons and your healing. Now this is a super new player tip, but I thought let me just mention it for those who are interested. If you struggle with your radiuses and you're not sure, hey, if I shatter, are these people getting it? There is an add-on called Taco. It's got a whole bunch of things for festivals and blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to get into all of that. But one thing it does have is it does have ranged circles. So if you do these, you can activate and toggle these ranged circles so you can see when certain skills are going to hit. Now, obviously for certain newer players like newer druids, I suggest to them to use this for certain things like their entangle. So that while they're doing their first raids like your Veil Guardians and things, you don't have to think about whether things are in range to use your entangle ability. What I would do if I was a newer player and I was worried about this, I would basically go here and basically go and set 1 to 300 radius. So that way you'll see where 300 radius is around you. Obviously you have a little bit of leeway. So if someone's on the line and you're not sure, it doesn't matter, that's 360 radius. That way when I use my shatters, I know that everybody in the circle will get those boons. Now I know that a lot of advanced players that maybe look at this guide are going to be like, man, that is the worst advice you could give. But you know what? As long as it works for you, if you're one of those players and you stress about those sort of things and you're going into fractal groups or raid groups and you're trying to figure out why your boon uptime isn't looking good, and you know, especially if you're tanking, you can try and position yourself to try and make sure your raid group is inside of that circle. And that's all I've got for you today. Just such a fun class to play. Really just enjoyed it. I played it a couple of times in a couple of raids and just messing around with it and just had an absolute blast. I think it's definitely a class that a newer player can really get into. Advanced players have been playing Guild Wars for a long time. Give it a shot. It is so fun to play. It's kind of scary at first, but as you go into it and you just play it, just opens up and just becomes a whole new world of experience and fun to have. Anyway, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and just keeps me motivated to make more videos. And if you didn't enjoy the video, thanks for watching anyway. I really appreciate everybody who watches, even the people that just comment nasty things. Like, it's one of those things. Thanks for watching anyway, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.